As a popular destination drawing visitors from around the country, Daytona Beach offers a unique blend of beautiful beaches, motorsports, and outdoor recreational activities, making it an ideal vacation spot year-round. This draw has made Daytona Beach one of the fastest developing aviation markets in the United States. Daytona Beach Air Traffic Control Tower operates as a Level 10 facility and serves as a Terminal Radar Approach Control, TRACON. It provides air traffic services 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and manages Class C airspace. The airspace encompassing Daytona Beach International Airport covers an extensive area, stretching approximately 65 miles from north to south and about 40 miles wide. Altitude limits in this airspace vary from the surface up to 11,000 feet. The tower and TRACON are located at DAB and extend their services to neighboring towered airports, as well as working closely with the Jacksonville Air Route Traffic Control Center, Jacksonville TRACON, and Orlando TRACON. The Daytona Beach Air Traffic Control Tower and TRACON have experienced record levels of traffic, resulting in increased congestion from both participating and non-participating aircraft near DAB's Class C airspace. Between 2020 and 2023, traffic at Daytona Beach increased by 29%. Daytona Beach is home to the NASCAR and Brown & Brown corporate fleets. Breeze Airways, Velo Airlines, American Airlines, and Delta Airlines also all offer non-stop service to and from the airport. Daytona Beach TRACON provides approach service to Sanford International Airport, SFB, and Orlando Executive Airport, ORL, via the T-Thor arrival, a busy arrival that transits DAB airspace and feeds into Orlando TRACON. Daytona Beach is the busiest general aviation airport in the state of Florida. In 2024, DAB amassed 675,200 operations, which ranked 24th out of 289 facilities within the national airspace system. An increase in general aviation training in the surrounding areas, including from smaller airports such as Ormond Beach, New Smyrna Beach, Flagler, Sanford, and Melbourne, and the neighboring flight schools, have led to increased traffic transiting around DAB Class 6 airspace as aircraft navigate north and south. As traffic levels continue to rise, the complexity of managing multiple aircraft types, each with different performance characteristics and communication capabilities, has become more pronounced. These conditions have created scenarios that require enhanced coordination and response from air traffic controllers to maintain safe separation and orderly flow. To address these evolving challenges, the FAA has conducted a comprehensive evaluation of operations in the region. This assessment underscores the need to modernize the existing Class C airspace to better reflect current traffic patterns and reduce potential risks. By making proactive adjustments now, we can enhance the safety, predictability, and efficiency of operations for all airspace users, while preparing for continued growth in the years ahead. The current Class C airspace is no longer sufficient to accommodate the growing needs of the aviation community and could increase the probability of risk within the national airspace system. Given the increase in air traffic volume and documented incidents occurring just outside the existing Class C airspace, we propose enhancing the current Class C airspace at Daytona Beach to continue to ensure safety and improve efficiency for all aircraft operating in the region. Moving forward, it is essential to recognize that the airspace surrounding Daytona Beach will continue to evolve in complexity and demand. With increasing traffic from commercial airlines, corporate operations, and flight training activity, the region's airspace structure must remain dynamic and adaptable. Anticipating these changes and proactively refining airspace design and procedures will be key to maintaining safety, efficiency, and operational integrity. Sustained collaboration among stakeholders and a forward-thinking approach will ensure that Daytona Beach remains a leader in managing the challenges of a rapidly advancing aviation environment.
Welcome to the FAA's informal airspace meeting on the proposed modification of Class Charlie airspace surrounding Daytona Beach International Airport. We're glad you could join us for this virtual event. I'm Andres Davis, the FAA's moderator for today's meeting. The purpose of this meeting is to gather additional information to be considered in developing the proposal. These meetings provide interested parties an opportunity to present views, recommendations, and comments on the proposal. Please note that the proposed modification would not affect the number of aircraft in the area and would not change the flight path which aircraft operate. Instead, these modifications are designed to better manage and communicate with aircraft operating within the Daytona Beach airspace. As a result, the proposed modification will increase safety and reduce the risk of conflicts between aircraft for every pilot during all operations. Here's our agenda. The meeting will start with the FAA's detailed presentation of the proposed Daytona Beach airspace design, followed by presentations and comments from the attendees who registered in advance to speak. Afterwards, our panel of experts will hold a question and answer session. Attendees on Zoom or YouTube can submit written questions while the meeting is streaming live. At the completion of the question and answer session, we'll adjourn after brief closing remarks. For those of you who are joining us on Zoom, your microphones are muted and cameras are off. To submit a question during the question and answer session, please enter your written question in the question and answer tab on the Zoom platform. If you are attending this meeting via YouTube, you can submit your questions directly in the comment section. If you're having technical issues connecting to the virtual meeting, you can text our technical support team at 949-478-0253. This phone number is for text messaging only. The FAA is soliciting comments on this proposal, and we encourage you to submit any comments you may have. Please note submitting a question during the question and answer session is not the same as providing a formal written comment. You can submit a formal comment by mailing it to the FAA at 1701 Columbia Avenue, College Park, Georgia, 30337, or by emailing it to the email address shown on the screen. Please provide your comments by Thursday, October 9th, 2025. You can also visit our website at www.faa.gov/go/Daytona Beach for more information about the project. Now, you will hear an overview of the Daytona Beach airspace and the applicable information regarding the proposed design from the air traffic controllers at Daytona Beach International Air Traffic Control Tower.
Hi, I'm Nick Taylor, a certified professional controller at Daytona Beach Air Traffic Control Tower and TRACON. In the next few slides, I'll provide a basic overview of the Daytona Beach International Airport and surrounding airspace operations. Daytona Beach International Airport is a public-use airport located in Daytona Beach, Florida, on the east coast of the state. The airspace at Daytona Beach Airport is Class C airspace and serves commercial air carriers, general aviation aircraft, and military operations. The airport is also closely associated with flight training, especially from Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University. Daytona Beach Airport offers daily commercial flights to select U.S. destinations primarily via American Airlines and Delta Airlines. However, it does not currently offer scheduled service to the Caribbean or other international destinations. With a projection of approximately 740,000 operations in 2025, projected through July 2025, Daytona Beach's traffic count will have increased by 19% over the last 10 years. Daytona Beach has 3 runways, including 2 parallel runways, runway 7 left and 25 right, and runway 7 right, 25 left, and a 3rd intersecting runway, runway 1634, which crosses the parallel runways. The airport features a complex taxiway system that provides access to air carriers, general aviation, and support facilities. General aviation and corporate operations are primarily based on the north and south sides of the airport. Daytona Beach hosts a variety of helicopter operations, including those for law enforcement, news media, medical evacuation, sightseeing tours, and flight training. The runways at Daytona Beach were built to align with the prevailing wind direction in the area. To operate safely, aircraft typically take off and land into the wind. You will see numbers on the runway, and those numbers indicate the compass heading the aircraft is facing as it lands or takes off. For example, runway 7 left and 25 right are 70 degrees in one direction and 250 degrees in the other. Parallel runways that have the same compass headings carry the designation L for left or R for right to distinguish them. Daytona Beach is equipped with 2 parallel runways designated runway 7 left and 25 right and runway 7 right and 25 left. The predominantly used runway at Daytona Beach is runway 7 left and 25 right due to the length and width of the runway. Runway 7 right and 25 left are only utilized for smaller general aviation aircraft, usually powered by a single engine. A third runway, designated runway 1634, intersects runway 7 left, 25 right, and runway 7 right and 25 left. The selection of the runway in use is managed by FAA Air Traffic Control and is dependent on wind direction and other operational factors. An east flow operation would utilize runway 7 left, 7 right, and runway 16 or 34. A west flow operation would utilize runways 25 right and 25 left, and either runway 16 or 34. Within 20 nautical miles of Daytona Beach International Airport, there is a mix of private and general aviation airports. There are 3 general aviation airports: DeLand Municipal Airport, Massey Ranch Airpark, and Spruce Creek Airport. There are 3 Class Delta airports located within 20 nautical miles of Daytona Beach: New Smyrna Beach Airport, Ormond Beach Municipal Airport, and Flagler Executive Airport. There are several flight schools operating in the area, which support training in both fixed-wing aircraft and helicopters. This includes notable schools such as Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University, Phoenix East Aviation, ATP, and more. The airspace surrounding Daytona Beach includes frequent flight operations by non-participating VFR aircraft. A non-participating VFR aircraft is one operating without ATC services, relying on visual navigation, and is only required to contact ATC when operating in controlled airspace, such as Class Charlie. The FAA directs traffic through 3-dimensional airspace, which is divided into airspace classes. The 4 primary categories of airspace are controlled, uncontrolled, special use, and other. Controlled airspace includes classes Alpha, Bravo, Charlie, Delta, and Echo. For our purposes today, we'll focus on Class Charlie and Class Delta. In controlled airspace, air traffic control services are provided to instrument flight rules or IFR flights and to visual flight rules or VFR flights in accordance with the airspace classification. In Class Charlie airspace, aircraft must be equipped with a 2-way radio and must establish communications with ATC prior to entering this airspace. A transponder with altitude reporting capability and ADS-B out is required to operate in and transition above the Class Charlie. Air traffic services and separation are provided to IFR and VFR aircraft. In Class Delta airspace, aircraft must also be equipped with a 2-way radio and must establish communications with ATC prior to entering this airspace. No separation services are provided to VFR aircraft. The following slides present graphics depicting the current and proposed Daytona Beach airspace, which we will individually review. We will also provide an overview of flight operations into and out of Daytona Beach Airport. The FAA has conducted an extensive study on this issue, and the following graphics reflect the detailed work done to design the proposed airspace. The graphic shows the current airspace chart for Daytona Beach International, which is Class Charlie, depicted by a solid garnet line, along with New Smyrna Beach Airport, Ormond Beach Airport, and Flagler Airport, which have Class Delta airspaces that are depicted by a dashed blue line. There are 3 general aviation airports within 15 nautical miles of Daytona Beach: DeLand Municipal, Massey Ranch Airpark, and Spruce Creek Airport. The current airspace for Daytona Beach has an airspace ceiling of 4,000 feet mean sea level, or MSL. The floor of the airspace varies. It starts at the ground, shown as surface, or SFC, close to the airport, and further out, it starts at 1,200 feet. New Smyrna and Ormond's airspaces start at the surface and go up to 1,199 feet MSL. Flagler's airspace starts at the surface and goes up to 1,500 feet MSL. The FAA began the Class Charlie modification process on December 5th, 2023. In February 2024, as a part of the Class Charlie modification process, the FAA met with the Daytona Beach Class Charlie Ad Hoc Committee to explain the proposed airspace changes. The Ad Hoc Committee is a group of local airspace users established to provide input and recommendations on the design or modification of Class Charlie airspace areas. The proposed design addresses the need to enhance the safety surrounding the existing Daytona Beach Class Charlie airspace. Area A of the Daytona Beach Class Charlie will include the inner ring of the current Class Charlie airspace, and it will be expanded 4 to 5 miles to the west and squared off to the northeast. The floor of this airspace starts at the surface, and the ceiling will be raised to 5,000 feet MSL. Area B will be expanded approximately 3 miles to the northwest and squared off. The floor of this airspace will remain at 1,200 feet MSL, and the ceiling will be raised to 5,000 feet MSL. Area C will include the easternmost portion of the inner ring of the current Class Charlie, starting approximately 1/2 mile offshore, and the airspace will be squared off to the northeast. The floor of this airspace will be 500 feet MSL, and the ceiling will be raised to 5,000 feet MSL. Area D will square off the westernmost portion of the airspace and extend it by approximately 1.5 miles. The floor of this airspace will be 2,000 feet MSL, and the ceiling will be 5,000 feet MSL. After listening to the Ad Hoc Committee's concerns, facilitating tours for local pilots, and reviewing the committee's final report with suggestions, Daytona Beach Air Traffic revised the initial proposed Class Charlie modification request. This graphic shows the Daytona Beach West Flow departures. Northbound jet and turboprop aircraft use the Roy's Standard Instrument Departure, or SID, to depart Daytona Beach from runways 25 right, 16, 34, or 25 left. Southbound jet and turboprop aircraft are vectored to the south through designated departure gates. These aircraft initially climb to 4,000 feet MSL before being turned on course and eventually issue a climb to 10,000 feet MSL or 11,000 feet MSL. VFR piston aircraft depart Daytona Beach westbound on a radar vector. These aircraft would typically be at or below 3,500 feet MSL. IFR piston aircraft depart Daytona Beach westbound and will receive vectors to join their flight plan route. These aircraft are initially assigned 3,000 feet MSL before being issued a climb higher. This graphic shows the Daytona Beach West Flow arrivals. Jet and turboprop aircraft from the north will arrive on the Thor 3 arrival and expect vectors to join a downwind for runway 25 right. Jet and turboprop aircraft from the south will be vectored to join a downwind for runway 25 right. VFR aircraft arriving from the north are vectored to the shoreline and then advised to visually follow the shoreline to join the final for runway 25 right. IFR aircraft are vectored near the shoreline to a downwind or base leg for runway 25 right. VFR aircraft arriving from the south are vectored to join a midfield downwind for runway 25 left at 1,500 feet MSL. IFR aircraft arriving from the south are vectored to join the downwind for runway 25 right. This chart depicts the current Daytona Beach Class Charlie airspace and the surrounding area airports. A one-day sample of radar tracking data is shown in dark blue for turboprop and jet aircraft and light blue for all others. This graphic depicts flights departing and arriving Daytona Beach in a west flow. This chart depicts the proposed Daytona Beach Class Charlie airspace and the surrounding area airports. A one-day sample of radar tracking data is shown in dark blue for turboprop and jet aircraft and light blue for all others. This graphic depicts flights departing and arriving Daytona Beach in a west flow. The proposed changes would reduce traffic conflicts with non-participating VFR aircraft occurring outside of the existing Daytona Beach Class Charlie airspace. Northbound jet and turboprop aircraft use the Roy's Standard Instrument Departure, or SID, to depart Daytona Beach from runways 7 left, 1634 or 7 right. Southbound jet and turboprop aircraft are vectored to the south through designated departure gates. These aircraft initially climb to 4,000 feet MSL before being turned on course and eventually issued a climb to 10,000 feet MSL or 11,000 feet MSL. VFR piston aircraft depart Daytona Beach eastbound and visually follow the shoreline north or south depending on their destination. These aircraft would typically be at or below 3,500 feet MSL. IFR piston aircraft depart Daytona Beach eastbound and will typically receive vectors to parallel the shoreline before being cleared on their flight planned route. These aircraft are initially assigned 3,000 feet MSL before being issued a climb higher. This graphic shows Daytona Beach east flow arrivals. Jet and turboprop aircraft from the north will arrive on the Thor 3 arrival and expect vectors to join a downwind for runway 7 left. Jet and turboprop aircraft from the south will be vectored to join a downwind for runway 7 left. Aircraft arriving from the north are vectored to a point northwest of Daytona Beach Airport and will either join a base leg or downwind leg for runway 7 left. VFR aircraft arriving from the south are vectored to join a midfield downwind for runway 7 right at 1,500 feet MSL. IFR aircraft arriving from the south are typically vectored to join a downwind for runway 7 left. This chart depicts the current Daytona Beach Class Charlie airspace and the surrounding area airports. A one-day sample of radar tracking data is shown in dark blue for turboprop and jet aircraft and light blue for all others. This graphic depicts flights departing and arriving Daytona Beach in an east flow. This chart depicts the proposed Daytona Beach Class Charlie airspace and the surrounding area airports. A one-day sample of radar tracking data is shown in dark blue for turboprop and jet aircraft and light blue for all others. This graphic depicts flights departing and arriving Daytona Beach in an east flow. The proposed changes would reduce traffic conflicts with non-participating VFR aircraft occurring outside of the existing Daytona Beach Class Charlie airspace. This chart depicts the current Daytona Beach Class Charlie airspace overlaid with the revised proposed Class Charlie airspace. The ceilings for all areas were raised from 4,000 feet to 5,000 feet. A cutout is made to the southern portion of the surface area to allow Spruce Creek arrivals and departures to safely go straight in or out from runway 6 or 24. A shelf is cut out of the eastern portion of the surface area to allow low altitude, non-participating aircraft to safely stay close to the land while transitioning outside of the Class Charlie airspace. The surface area and outer shelf to the west are expanded to protect the higher volume of jet, turboprop, and IFR arrivals and departures from non-participating aircraft. This graphic shows the inner surface area of the proposed Daytona Beach Class Charlie airspace. It would be squared off to the northeast and extended and squared off to the west to protect Daytona Beach arrivals and departures. The airspace ceiling will increase from 4,000 feet MSL to 5,000 feet MSL. A cutout would be made to the southern portion of the inner circle to allow for straight out or straight in arrivals and departures to runways 6 and 24 at Spruce Creek. Why are these changes needed? As illustrated in this graphic, aircraft landing at Daytona Beach typically cross Folig and Dyack at 1,600 feet MSL and Banner at 1,040 feet MSL. Non-participating aircraft currently transition just outside of the Class Charlie surface area at 1,100 feet MSL, which is directly beneath Folig. Extending the surface area, Area A, to the west mitigates traffic conflicts between aircraft descending on the final approach course to runway 7 left at Daytona Beach and non-participating aircraft. Proposed changes deconflict jet and turboprop aircraft departing Daytona Beach and climbing to 4,000 feet MSL with non-participating traffic that are currently transitioning above the Class Charlie. Proposed changes provide deconfliction for aircraft climbing on the initial segment of the departure during a critical phase of flight. Cutouts on the southern and eastern portions reduce existing Class Charlie airspace in these areas, allowing for an easier transition through the airspace to the south and east, where we typically do not have as many traffic conflicts. This graphic shows the outer circle of the proposed Daytona Beach Class Charlie airspace. The airspace ceiling will increase from 4,000 feet MSL to 5,000 feet MSL. A squared off section is added to the northwest portion of the airspace to protect Daytona Beach arrivals and departures from non-participating aircraft. So why is this change necessary? The northwestern boundary has been modified to provide additional airspace for downwind and base leg into Daytona Beach Airport for runway 7 left. This will deconflict IFR traffic and non-participating traffic near the 8 to 10 mile base and final turns. The ceiling of this airspace will be raised to 5,000 feet MSL to separate jet and turboprop aircraft departing and arriving Daytona Beach from non-participating aircraft transitioning above. Area C is part of the inner ring of the Class Charlie. The airspace ceiling will increase from 4,000 feet MSL to 5,000 feet MSL. The floor of the airspace will be raised from surface level to 500 feet MSL. A cutout would be made to the eastern portion of the inner area to allow low altitude, non-participating aircraft to remain safely closer to land. What is the reason behind this change? Raising the floor of this airspace allows non-participating aircraft to transition below the Class Charlie airspace closer to the shoreline. Area D is the western portion of the Class Charlie airspace. The floor of this airspace will be 2,000 feet MSL. The airspace ceiling will be at 5,000 feet MSL. What prompted this change? Extending the westernmost portion of the Class Charlie by approximately 1.5 miles will protect the IFR base leg for runway 7 left into Daytona Beach, which is typically flown at 2,000 to 4,000 feet MSL and 9 to 10 miles away from the airport. The floor of this airspace will be 2,000 feet MSL to allow more room for non-participating aircraft to avoid the heavy traffic in the vicinity of the land.
In the upcoming slides, I'll discuss the FAA's rulemaking and environmental review processes. Any changes to Class Charlie airspace must go through the rulemaking process. Rulemaking is the process federal agencies use to make new regulations. Any proposed rule goes through numerous reviews, and the public has the opportunity to review and comment on the proposed rule. The FAA is required to review and consider every comment. Once the agency has read and considered all comments, it decides whether to go ahead with the final rule. The agency may adopt a final rule that is identical or similar to the initial proposal, or it might make changes based on the comments. As shown on the slide, this informal airspace meeting is an integral part of the process that comes before the notice of proposed rulemaking. Before any changes can be made, the proposed rule must go through an environmental review, which is required by the National Environmental Policy Act, or NEPA. NEPA requires that the agency evaluate environmental and related social and economic effects of the proposed action. The review includes a preliminary technical review, a preliminary environmental review, an internal review, and choice of appropriate NEPA review, which could include extraordinary circumstances and significant impacts. The graphic on this slide depicts the FAA's general NEPA process for all projects. It is not specific to this project, but it will be applied to this project. We're about to begin the live portion of the meeting and the question and answer session with the expert panel. Here is a summary of the next steps in the process. Comments will be accepted until October 9, 2025. The FAA will consolidate and review comments. The FAA will consider comments and incorporate pertinent modifications. The FAA will finalize the environmental review. Once the notice of proposed rulemaking has been published in the Federal Register, there will be a separate 60-day comment period. We encourage you to submit your written comments. You may do so by addressing them to the FAA via mail or via email to the address shown on the screen. Please submit your comments no later than October 9th, 2025. You can also visit our website at www.faa.gov/go/Daytona Beach for more information about the project. Today's meeting is being recorded and will be available on FAA's website for future viewing. Hello again. I'm Andres Davis, and I'll be the moderator for the live portion of this workshop. I'd like to cover 3 procedural items before we begin the question and answer session. First, if you're having technical issues connecting to the workshop, you can text our tech support number anytime during the workshop at 949-478-0253. Second, we're streaming this workshop on the FAA's YouTube live feed and recording it for viewing on our website after the workshop concludes. Finally, this meeting pertains to the proposed modification of the Daytona Beach Class Charlie airspace, and we'll be fielding questions related to the proposed change. We're requesting that questions outside of the scope of the proposal be limited to ensure there is ample time to address questions related to the proposed modification. We will now begin the segment where participants can provide comments or make presentations. Due to the high number of speakers this evening, each person is limited to 3 minutes. We'll announce each attendee's name and unmute their microphone in the Zoom webinar. Please keep your remarks concise and avoid repetition to maximize time for the question and answer session. Just a reminder that spoken statements are not considered formal comments on the proposal. These must be submitted in writing as per the meeting notice. If you prefer to submit a formal comment instead of speaking, please inform the panel so we can adjust the schedule accordingly. I will add that all presentations are the speaker's personal perspective and do not reflect the opinions of the FAA. It appears that we have 13 presenters today, and the first presentation is from John Foster. John, you have 3 minutes to speak. While John adjusts his mute, we will reset. John Foster. Okay. We'll come back to John and move on to the next person. Well, let's just wait just a second. John Foster, are you here? Okay. We'll come back and see if John did make it, and we appreciate his interest. The next presenter is Mr. David Baldwin. David, you have 3 minutes to speak.
John Foster's using my computer, Andres, so if you'd like to start him now, you're welcome to do that, if that works for you.
It appears that we're on your slide. We can come back to him after you, David. Good evening.
Okay, good evening. Nice to see you again. This is 3 minutes long. I'll try to get it done quickly. I'm David Baldwin. I was co-chair of the Daytona Class Charlie Modification Ad Hoc Committee. The committee met for 14 months every 2 weeks to analyze the FAA proposal and development of recommendations. The committee did so with resistance and very little collaboration from the FAA, unfortunately. Information like the originating staff study had to be requested through the Freedom of Information Act, and no pertinent traffic data was ever produced despite numerous requests. The 200-page ad hoc committee report on the Daytona Class C airspace modification concluded the following. We recommended to not expand the Class C boundaries westward or into new sectors. Maintain the current Class C structure, avoiding areas intended to sterilize airspace. Address safety concerns through operational improvements, not structural redesign. From 1993 through 2024, the FAA official traffic program OpsNet shows long-term stability in operations at Daytona Beach. The last 17 years of TRACON data confirms that there is no sustained growth that would justify enlarging the Class Charlie. Sample days and reviewed schedules show as few as 8 to 12 air carrier arrivals into Daytona per day, underscoring low traffic demand. The FAA Controller Workforce Plan, published last month, shows no significant growth forecast, and the current level is well below year 2000 levels. Daytona Beach is unique as over 95% of all traffic and training is training, and those schools all agree they cannot possibly add more aircraft as their programs are saturated. Committee FOIA requests revealed only 3 mandatory occurrence reports tied to TCAS resolution advisories in the last year. None were classified as significant occurrences or indicated systemic safety problems. The extremely low frequency shows no justification for a major Class C redesign. Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University, the largest airspace user with well over 50% of Daytona traffic, conducted an extensive risk analysis at the committee's request using ADS-B data. Their study concluded that the proposed airspace changes would increase, not reduce, the risk for all users by compressing VFR traffic into narrow corridors. The study emphasized the effective safety improvements come from better traffic management and procedure adjustments, not exclusionary airspace. The FAA staff study did not provide any empirical data to support any of the proposed changes. There was no hard data supporting any change in the study. In conclusion, the OpsNet traffic indicates no traffic growth trend. The MOR TCAS data shows very few events, no systemic issues. Allegiant Airlines feedback conflicts stem from descent practices, not boundaries. Embry-Riddle study, the proposed expansion raises the risks of mid-airs and reduces safety. The ad hoc committee's recommendation was to not modify the Class C boundaries, instead implement operational changes for vectoring and altitude practices. And the ad hoc report is available on request by me, or I'm sure it can be gained through the FAA. Thank you.
Thank you, David. John Foster, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Davis. I apologize for that early hiccup. I thought it was known that Dave and I were together, so that's my mistake. My name's John Foster. I was on the ad hoc committee. I'm an airline transport pilot and a certified flight instructor. I've been working on this project for 7 years, and now I have 3 minutes to try to digest it. Since 2017, pilots based at Spruce Creek, over 450 aircraft, have been requesting relief from the proximity of the Spruce Creek Airport to the Daytona Beach Class Charlie surface area. This is necessary to alleviate the unsafe compression of the traffic pattern north of Spruce Creek. What you are looking at is a snapshot of the area as produced by Vertower. Each one of these lines represents an aircraft operating below 1,200 feet MSL. In other words, these aircraft would fit the non-participating category, except that all 4 aircraft that penetrated this airspace on August 22nd in 24 hours, all 4 were being worked by ATC. The one to the west of Route 95 is a IFR arrival on a visual approach. The other 2 were Rose arrivals that were descended too soon. The airspace west of Route 95 is always empty below 1,200 feet. The first proposal that we received in September of 21, there was a cutout similar to this as part of the proposal. The second proposal in 2023, the cutout size had been reduced but was still included. And now in September 25, the cutout has been removed. Why? Why are users being denied access to empty airspace? I noticed on slide 22, the previous gentleman said something about a cutout. I don't see it. Past objections raised by the FAA for this cutout related to the final approach fix runway 34, EORI, which is approximately 1 mile east of Spruce Creek. The crossing altitude is 1,600 feet. According to FAA directives, IFR traffic need not be contained in Class Charlie. A similar situation exists at Chicago Midway. When runway 22 left is in use, airspace like this is permitted to be used by non-participating airplanes. Chicago Tracon fixed that with a letter to airmen. A perfect non-rulemaking solution to a problem like this. This non-rulemaking solution was also very effective at Charleston. Also, the Rose arrival passes over this area at 1,500 feet MSL. Per a letter of agreement with several local flight schools, traffic on the Rose arrival is to maintain 1,500 feet until Bevel Road, which is well north of the proposed cutout as you see. Additionally, the staff study failed to adequately justify the need for such a significant radical variation in airspace design as required by FAA Order 7400.2 Romeo. The Service Center did not explore any alternative options to this airspace variation, such as vectoring well above 2,000, raising the lower altitude sector to 4,000, or non-rulemaking cooperative letters to airmen type situations. Fewer than 10 non-participating airplanes fly through this area and the sterilized airspace proposed west of Daytona Beach. Fewer than 10 in a 24-hour period does not justify this radical airspace change. Thank you, Mr. Davis. Good to see you again.
Thank you. Same here. Next presentation is John LeBlanc. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you. I've been flying in this area for about 30 years and noticed the increase in the restricted airspace over those years to the west of DeLand, and now this airspace change in Daytona proposed. And there's, of course, a lot of training aircraft, and with the Orlando airspace, it's bringing a lot of training activity into an ever increasingly smaller and smaller area. And I just don't understand why some of the things that are being proposed are there. I've been in close contact with one of the people who have been on the committee, and I just don't understand what the benefit it is. And I'm looking forward to hearing more, but it just seems like I don't see what solutions this offers, and I'll hold my comments there. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Next presenter, Brett Aaron. You have 3 minutes.
Hi, Mr. Davis. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak. I'm a physician who's been involved in aviation for 30 years and patient safety and aviation safety secondarily. Look at these changes from a Swiss cheese model of patient safety and how it's going to either increase or decrease the risk of accidents. I'd like to expand on the comments, incorporate and expand on the comments already made, but there's over 400 aircraft at Spruce Creek and very few daily airline and turboprop transport aircraft going in and out of Daytona. So I think you have to look at the benefits to a very few that are very small, and the risk to the large number of operations and aircraft we have in and out of Spruce Creek in making your safety judgment. The ability to get squawk codes out of Daytona Beach for non-participating aircraft is at best limited or delayed. Thus, to continue circling, waiting to get transit permission through the Charlie, most people opt to go either around to the east or around to the west. This increases the non-participating aircraft density, particularly in the area of DeLand, which is already very busy in operations, has a jump school, an active parachute program where you can't overfly the airport. So everything is going to be compressed between the Charlie and DeLand as they transit to the north around the Charlie. Rather than increasing safety, this compression is likely to increase non-participating aircraft density into a narrow 1,000-foot airspace between the Charlie and DeLand. I'm very interested in seeing what the environmental review suggests. The When you make pilots circle or wait for permission to enter and transit to Charlie, they're burning fuel. They also, if you make them deviate around the Charlie airspace because they can't get permission to participate, that's going to increase the fuel burn, increase greenhouse gases, and very interested to see how this affects the environmental concerns. It also increased cost.
Thank you, Brett. Next, we have Don Flanagan. Don, you have 3 minutes to speak. Don Flanagan, you have 3 minutes to speak. While he looks for a mute button, possibly, just a reminder that the presentations are not the FAA's opinions and is the person's perspective. All right, we'll check back in with Don.
Can you hear me now?
I do.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Don Flanagan. I'm a commercial instrument pilot, resident and homeowner in Spruce Creek Fly-In. I'm addressing this meeting to support the request for the additional cutout of airspace that was previously discussed and agreed in the ad hoc committee, the space just north of Spruce Creek Airport. As noted, the data shows that this small section of airspace has minimal traffic. When you take into account the approximate 35,000 operations each year from Spruce Creek, adding this small cutout of airspace or removing this small cutout of airspace from the Class C airspace would create a significant improvement in safety by providing an additional margin of safety for pilots flying through this airspace, as well as operating in and out of the Spruce Creek Airport. This would allow additional margin for the pilots to fly standard traffic patterns, as well as executing entries into the traffic patterns as recommended in FAA 8083 handbook. Again, making these changes to the inner circle of the Daytona Beach Class C airspace will provide pilots and aircraft operating in and out of Spruce Creek an additional margin of safety, which I think is necessary. Thank you.
Thank you, Don. Next is David Gall. David, you have 3 minutes to speak.
Hi, my name is David Gall. I'm a veteran air traffic controller, 34 years. Started out in Vero Beach when we were doing 225,000 operations a year with nothing but a pair of binoculars. I've been flying since before transponders were a requirement. Now we have transponders and ADS-B. We have Class Charlie airspace, which was never intended to segregate airplanes or keep airplanes out, but to designate an area where services would be provided that were enhanced over the services that were available further away from airports. It appears to me that you're using this Class Charlie airspace redesign to try and keep airplanes out of certain areas. That was never the intent of Class Charlie airspace. Class Charlie is intended to provide enhanced services within Class Charlie. So by increasing the size of your Class Charlie airspace, you're obligating yourself to a larger volume of airspace in which to provide services, which we've already heard testified tonight that are difficult to obtain, perhaps because of a shortage of controllers. I don't know the dynamics of that. But it seems to me that you're using an airspace redesign in an incorrect manner to try and exclude airplanes from airspace that you're unwilling to use the current technology to separate from using your radar and your ADS-B. Specifically, there was some mention of airplanes flying underneath the finals. All you have to do is vector your airplanes another 500 feet higher and you'll stop getting those confliction reports for the non-participating aircraft flying under the finals. That's an administrative problem. That's a management problem. That's a controller training problem. That's not an airspace problem. And it easily mitigates what you're claiming is an airspace problem. Also, you seem to be using the airspace to try and capture certain operations and claim certain benefits, but you haven't really made the case that these benefits would accrue for those operations. Raising the ceiling of the airspace to 5,000 feet, for example, isn't justified by the presentation that we just saw. Likewise, with other airspace areas along the shoreline, you've not given any geographic reference that airplanes can follow to stay outside of the surface area, which appears to be drawn about 500 feet offshore. And likewise with the Spruce Creek cutout that people are asking for. Your primary users are your customers, and they're here testifying that they do not want this change. Embry-Riddle doesn't want this change. What your users are asking for, like the Spruce Creek cutout, is being denied through the process. I've read the ad hoc report, and I have to agree with John Foster, Dave Baldwin, and all the other people here that this is an inappropriate use of Class Charlie airspace, and it's not well designed. It needs to be.
Thank you. Next, Eric Hitchcock. Eric, you have 3 minutes to speak.
Hello, and my name's Eric Hitchcock, and I'm a resident and pilot at Spruce Creek. Is there any way you could put up the graphic that John Foster had that shows the vert tower and the depiction of the traffic pattern that aircraft are using? Well, evidently you don't have that capability. Well, if you look at that graphic and just flipped it over, imagined all those airplanes on the opposite downwind, we need a cutout that protects for that exact shape and size. There is no graphic cutout that you're proposing on the current depiction that you displayed there, and there is no reason whatsoever that I can find that you need to increase the airspace due to traffic volume or conflicts. I know this because I'm an air traffic controller, and I did it for 35 years. And I did it at the center, and I did it at the Tracons, and I did it at very busy VFR towers. The next point I want to make is your line at the shoreline is too far off the shoreline. It needs to be the shoreline. If you're going to force an aircraft to be a half a mile off the shoreline, very difficult to judge that. So make it the shoreline and 500 feet below if you're going to do anything. We need that corridor. And aircraft, turbojet aircraft, do not need to be at 1,600 feet or the minimum vectoring altitude, 7 to 8 miles away from the approach end of the runway. They need to be at 2,000 feet as a minimum. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next is Stu Morse. Stu, you have 3 minutes to speak.
Okay, my name is Stu Morse. I'm a private instrument-rated pilot with over 5,500 hours. Also, I was an air traffic controller for 49 years, flying in and out of Spruce Creek since 1987. According to your proposed Class C airspace changes, the at or below 1,199 feet currently on the 5-mile ring is being extended to the 10-mile ring. Additionally, there's an extension of at or below 1,999 feet, another 2 miles west, which is close proximity to DeLand Airport. That means we have to fly an additional 5 miles out to go northwest, or the current 5-mile ring keeps us out of the ILS 7 approach right now. What you're doing is forcing us to fly 10 miles, greatly compressing the airspace due to the DeLand Airport to the west, creating a dangerous situation with VFR traffic arriving to Daytona from the west and northwest. And that's a lot of head-on traffic that we have to be looking for. Currently, there's a NOTAM for parachuting jumping at the land. There's a 2-mile ring, one of the busiest jump centers in the country. It just now, as right now, touches the 10-mile outer ring of the Class C. And what you're proposing is for us to fly into the safety area created by that NOTAM, which creates a dangerous situation with parachutists and with traffic, many of which are student pilots from Daytona, Ormond Beach, Flagler, New Smyrna Beach, Sanford, all inbound to the land to do touch and goes. Today, I received an FAA safety briefing from Ed Goldstein, FAA Office of Communications, regarding parachuting safety. I wonder if this proposal has been run by him. Lastly, non-participating aircraft flying around the proposed airspace to the west, coming up from the south, will be forced also to overfly the land airport. Is this safe? I mean, you're creating a much compressing airspace and adding a lot more traffic. And as somebody else had said, we have over 30,000 operations out of Spruce Creek. If you make half of them to the west, you've got 15,000 operations going out there. It's a lot of airplanes, and you're not giving us the airspace that we have requested. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Madison Nortz. Madison, you have 3 minutes to speak.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Madison Nortz. I'm a commercial instrument rated pilot based in Florida, and I'm part of the government team at the Experimental Aircraft Association, along with Sean Elliott, who's also on the call today. We have several concerns with the Class Charlie airspace reshape that has been proposed at Daytona Beach. First and foremost, the redesign focuses almost exclusively on the demands of participating traffic over non-participating traffic, which that's a concern in and of itself, as Class Charlie airspace isn't designed to exclude operations. That's stated in Order 7110.65. But if we set aside that statement for a moment, and if we just focus on the demands of the participating traffic, the reshape of the airspace fails to consider the operational realities, the safety concerns, and the extensive data that's been provided by the largest participant in this airspace, which is, of course, Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University. Of particular concern is the compression of the airspace leading toward the practice areas off to the west of the airport, which is creating pinch points and bottlenecks and forcing VFR traffic into smaller and more congested airspace. And of course, that comes with a heightened risk of mid-airs, increasing pilot workload, and in our opinion, it's undermining the safety principles that airspace is intended to serve. Equally troubling to us is the lack of a Spruce Creek cutout to the south of Daytona Beach, who are your largest group of non-participants. Spruce Creek pilots have been advocating for airspace relief for nearly a decade, and the requests have been backed up by traffic data in the requested specified cutout area. And from what we've seen, there really hasn't been any appropriate justification for why this request was denied. So it's our belief that we aren't appropriately acknowledging the concerns of two of the biggest stakeholders in this airspace. And if you're going to disregard the concerns of the biggest group of participants and non-participants, then I question who this reshape is really even going to benefit. And then on to the third point, it's also important to remember that redesigning airspace is not the only solution in this case, nor should it be the first consideration. Order 7400.2 says, quote, non-rulemaking alternatives must be examined before proposing rulemaking airspace changes. And the order goes on to list several examples, including changing facility procedures, modifying instrument procedures, and another big one is pilot and controller education programs and aviation safety seminars. There's examples of this happening at Class Charlies across the country, but for whatever reason, we really seem to be jumping the gun here in Daytona. In EAA's opinion, the proposed airspace reshape is first, not giving full consideration to the recommendations of two of the biggest users in the airspace. And second, it also appears that it's not even following the FAA's own guidance on Class Charlie airspace that's been written into the orders. I will also add that EAA will be submitting written comments that go into more detail on these points and others that I haven't had time to address today. But that's just about 3 minutes. So thank you for the opportunity to share our concerns.
Thank you. Next, Sean Elliott. Sean, you have 3 minutes.
Okay, Andres, Madison just covered EA's salient points on the issue. I wanted to make sure that we had time in there if needed, but she's covered everything and all of our concerns. And most importantly, we will be following up in greater detail, both in written comments to this public meeting as well as to the NPRM once it's published. So thank you for the time.
Thank you. Next, we have Roger Haley. Roger, you have 3 minutes to speak.
I am. Hi, my name's Roger Hawley. I'm a private pilot, instrument rated, living in Spruce Creek. 34 years of controller. And I don't have much to add. It appears all the other controllers and neighbors here have given you our thoughts. We definitely need a cutout. It's actually somewhat dangerous coming in here at times, as the airspace is only a few miles wide. If you have to avoid another plane, you may go into Daytona's airspace. And the compression on the west side is unacceptable, putting us right over the land with the parachute activities. I routinely fly over Zalgo and Folig to the north, and I see very few airplanes, and I have ADS-B. Also, the corridor over the beach, 500 and that starts at 500 and above, forces us to fly 499 or below with all the banner towing operations. So that's really all I have to add. Most of the points have already been spoken, and I appreciate the opportunity to agree with everyone.
And Roger, I apologize for the mispronunciation of your last name. Okay, we'll move on. Next is William Lieberman. William, you have 3 minutes to speak.
Hello, I'm Bill Lieberman. I go by Bill. Resident here at Spruce Creek, airline transport pilot. I've flown everything from gliders to 4-engine transport aircraft, and I've flown general aviation throughout my career. Wright Brothers Master Pilot Award recipient, and resident and airplane owner here at Spruce Creek. I'm looking at a couple of different things. The cutout obviously is very important. You cannot fly a normal downwind to runway 6 because you're watching whether you're violating the airspace to the north or maintaining a normal downwind, which forces you to be heads down in a very busy airspace area. And I think that's very important. What is also important is the compression of all these aircraft over the DeLand area. With the parachuting going on there, I have instructed at DeLand, and the pattern gets very saturated there. And a lot of times you'll have to leave the traffic area and make a circle. And now you're having to watch for airspace, plus everyone trying to avoid the this revised ring. So in the way it is now, where you're able to cut inside of that and stay outside the inner ring and fly to the northwest, is a much safer alternative. If you're forcing everybody to either try to get a squawk and Daytona gets very busy and isn't able to accommodate us often. By forcing everybody over that DeLand area, you're putting it in a very high traffic area. The parachutists and aircraft that are trying to re-enter the pattern in there. You add to that mix all of the outbound aircrafts from Spruce Creek, and you have an unsafe situation. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. Next, we have Daniel Archer. Daniel, you have 3 minutes to speak.
Hey, good afternoon. I just want to echo the work that John Foster and Dave Baldwin have done. They've done an amazing job. Cornelia Data. I'm fairly new to the Creek. I've been here about 2 years. I'm a retired military aviator. captain at a major airline, and I'm a current designee in good standing with the Philadelphia FSDO. A couple things. The cutout for Spruce Creek, I just can't echo that enough. If you're doing more than 90 knots, just like the previous gentleman said, you can't fly a normal pattern. So now you're more concerned with, am I going to touch the surface base Charlie versus am I flying a safe pattern? Am I looking out for other traffic? Am I monitoring my airspeed, my altitude accordingly? Second off, just from a designee standpoint, I do a lot of check rides out of Daytona, and these poor kids shell out so much money to get vectored outside of the Charlie, to go out to a practice area, to go get maybe 20 minutes of an hour and a half flight of actual flight training before they got to get in the queue. So I've on average, and I give check rides from San Francisco to New York, Daytona Beach is one of the most inefficient places to get an airplane in and out of. And my heart goes out to these kids, because you'll see them private pilots regularly with 60, 70, 80 hours just because it takes 40 minutes to get back into the airport. And I'm just not sure that extending that airspace is going to do anything for the efficiency. We're trying to solve a problem that just doesn't exist. And furthermore, the safety aspect of it, pushing all that traffic over there in the Wild West, as we call it, over to land, is you're creating a problem. You are creating an incident right there. That is my plea. Everybody here has had amazing points. I said I'm pretty new to the area, but that was something that was kind of appalling to me the first time I was in an airplane, that I needed to do about 110, 120 knots, and I'm sitting there banking it over, almost to an unsafe amount, so that I'm more concerned with busting that surface-based Charlie than I am flying a normal traffic pattern. So thank you very much for your time, and thank everyone for the hard work they've been doing.
Thank you. Next is TJ Schimbecker. TJ, you have 3 minutes to speak.
Hi, this is TJ Schembecker. Thank you for the time. Like everyone else on the call, I have reviewed the proposed airspace changes, and I'm quite concerned. This is a huge expansion of airspace that is far greater in size than what the regulations say is a standard Class Charlie. For non-standard Class Charlies, it's supposed to be done with justification and after other alternatives have been explored, which doesn't seem to be the case here. In addition, the proposed area is larger than many other Class Charlie airports that are busier than the Daytona. In fact, there are 6 Class Charlie airports in the state of Florida, and none of them have a height of 5,000, as this proposal shows. In addition, this proposal does not even address the issues caused by the current surface area, which have been mentioned already. The surface area creates a huge problem for the Spruce Creek Airport, and it's difficult for pilots to fly safe standard traffic patterns as a result of that. Further, expanding the surface area to the west will also negatively impact DeLand, which has one of the busiest skydiving operations in the state. Alternatively, the FAA was given a detailed ad hoc committee report over 200 pages with factual data that gave pointed suggestions, specifically including a cutout from this to the surface area from the Dunlawton Bridge to the large water tank. Both of these are prominent visual landmarks, and by including this cutout in the revision, you would be able to enhance safety. I think you'll see from the ADSB data that the cutout would not interfere with any departures from Daytona. And even if runway 34 is in use, a letter to airmen could handle and address that situation. Overall, I understand that the ad hoc committee provided you this report and feedback, but it really feels like the feedback has been completely ignored. Further, it feels like this proposal is not backed by sufficient data. Any changes to airspace should be supported by factual data, and in my opinion, the current proposal is not. In summary, I implore you not to proceed with this proposal as is, and instead incorporate the feedback from the ad hoc committee report. Thanks for your attention and your consideration.
Thank you. The last presenter is Terry Merkley. Terry, you have 3 minutes to speak. Terry Merkley. You have 3 minutes to speak. Okay, we'll wait just one more moment. Terry? Okay. We will move on. That concludes our public presentations for this evening. Next, we will move on to the live question and answer session to address the questions received from registrants, followed by questions from Zoom and the FAA social media platforms. At this time, I'd like to introduce our panelists. Mike Mangan. Mike is a NACA Airspace and Procedure Representative and Certified Professional Controller here at Daytona Beach. Next is Theo Eftonimus. Theo is the Operations Manager here at Daytona Beach. Welcome, panelists, and thank you for representing your facility. Before we answer questions from this meeting, I'd like to ask the panelists a few questions received from registrants during the Zoom registration process. The first question that we received, or that we're answering this evening, is why do we need this airspace change? And I see Mike is already off of mute and ready to answer that. Mike, good evening. Why do we need this airspace change?
Thanks, Andres. So this change is driven by a comprehensive look at safety incidents that have occurred near Daytona Beach due to non-participating VFR traffic that gets into close proximity to aircraft landing and departing Daytona Beach Airport. So our goal is to enhance the safety and the flight efficiency by ensuring that all aircraft operating in the confines of the Class Charlie are in communication with air traffic controllers so we can more precisely monitor the arriving and departing aircraft, as well as the transitioning aircraft. The additional level of safety should reduce the amount of conflicts between aircraft in the vicinity and mitigate the risk.
Well put, Mike. Thank you. Next question. Do air traffic controllers support this proposal? And I'll go again with Mike. And we have another question we'll come back to. But Mike, do the air traffic controllers support this proposal?
Air traffic controllers 100% support the proposal. We have numerous safety events around Daytona Beach area. The controllers are in full support of expanding the existing Class Charlie. We're the experts in the local air traffic procedures. We've been part of the process. We were able to share our experiences and concerns that we have with the current airspace, as well as document many incidents that have occurred around the airspace. And with the Class Charlie, that comes communication and predictability. That's what we're looking for. We fully expect that we'll be able to provide a better service to all the aircraft in the area if we have that.
And Theo, just to speak to the collaboration, as far as the support for the proposal, what's management's perspective on the proposal?
Well, at Daytona, the management takes into account the users, of course, the controller input, the ad hoc committee, everybody here locally. We support it 100%. Like Mike said, predictability and communication is key in maintaining the safety and efficiency of the operation. Safety always being number one. We can't miss what we can't talk to and do. So that is key for this entire thing. So in short, management 100% supports the expansion, the proposal. We feel like we've done a comprehensive job in taking into account the users, all users, not only commercial, but the general aviation population as well.
Well put, Theo. And there's a question that's pretty bluntly worded. So I'm going to word it exactly the same way. Why can't the FAA leave operations the way they are now? Theo, why can't the FAA leave operations the way they are now?
Sure. Kind of expanding on what I had just said, the increased volume and complexity of Daytona Beach have just increased the amount of safety incidents that we've been seeing. The new proposed airspace is going to improve the safety and efficiency, and it's going to ensure predictability on the flight paths for all aircraft in the vicinity of the airport. That way we can deconflict participating and non-participating aircraft and mitigate that risk in areas of heavy congestion.
Thank you, Theo. And Mike, did you want to add something to that about why the FAA just can't leave the operations the way they are now?
Our number one job is to mitigate risk, and with the increase in traffic in the area from all airports, not just Daytona, all the airports around, and the transitioning aircraft, not just the aircraft landing and departing Daytona. We want to keep the same procedures we're using, but with the current airspace, the current Class Charlie, which is around 30 years old, it's just old airspace. The intent of the Class C and hasn't kept up with the modern pace of air traffic. It's just not sufficient for use anymore.
And what I heard from the both of you is the airspace hasn't been touched in a long time, and the operation has changed over the decades, and there's a need to innovate and make the operation a little more efficient and enhance the safety. Thank you both for that. I appreciate it. The next question that we have is, how do you know the new airspace will be safe? And Theo, if you don't mind helping me out with that question, how do you know the new airspace will be safe?
Sure. Well, all the new procedures are put through a rigorous safety review. When we developed the proposed airspace design, we considered other examples around the NAS, other airspace classification examples, with similar makeup to what we're proposing. Of course, we would not propose an airspace change until we determine that it is safe, and that consistent message that the FAA's first priority is always safety, the efficiency is the second priority for us. So we've done the research, we've proposed something we feel is very safe, and it's going to continue to mitigate that risk.
Thank you, Theo. And I should add that anything that we introduce into the National Airspace System goes through, like Theo touched on, a rigorous safety risk management system. And there are a number of different technical experts and sometimes even external stakeholders that participates in vetting that proposal. And in this case, again, this is a proposal. So thank you. Thank you again. The next question, were commercial aircraft considered when designing this proposed change? If so, is the FAA only considering the effects on commercial aircraft? I'm going to ask both of you guys to help out with that question because I do think that there's something to be gained from both of you guys' experience. So I'll start off with Theo, if you don't mind. Were commercial aircraft considered when designing this proposed change? And if so, is the FAA only considering the effects on commercial aircraft?
It's a good question. Of course, commercial aircraft were considered in the design of this proposed change. They're not the only consideration. The majority of our traffic here at Daytona Beach is general aviation. So Daytona Beach took into account feedback from ad hoc committee, which includes the general aviation users, flight schools, glider, aerobatic groups, and some of the commercial groups as well. The proposed change enhances the safety and protects the flight paths of all aircraft participating in ATC services, while still allowing the non-participating aircraft to maneuver safely under and around the new airspace with minimal impact to their flight path.
And Mike, did you have anything you wanted to add as far as the commercial aircraft only being considered versus the GA aircraft? What considerations did you have during the proposed design?
I just want to highlight that, we're well aware that the majority of our traffic is going to be general aviation, especially flight training aircraft. So that's what we designed the airspace to accommodate. That's what the majority of the design goes to, and the procedures that we use to get them in and out of Daytona.
Thank you, gentlemen. I appreciate that. The next question, will a recording of this meeting be made available? Yes, on the FAA's YouTube channel and It will be posted on the FAA's Daytona Beach Community Engagement page. So this will be available for some time. The next question, how will this change affect arrivals and departures into Sanford in general? Additionally, how will it specifically affect arrivals to Sanford Runway 18 and departures from Sanford Runway 36? I think Theo, maybe, I see you're off of mute. Good to see that. How will this change affect arrivals and departures to Sanford in general, specifically Runway 18, departures from Sanford Runway 36, arrivals into 18 and Sanford Runway 36 departures?
The short answer is it will not. The proposed airspace change does not affect Sanford arrivals or departures, any of the operation there. Arrivals to 18 and departures from 36 will use the same procedures that they use today. So no effect from this proposed Charlie change to the Sanford complex.
Thank you. This next question has to do with the Thor. Mike, I'm going to ask for your help on this one. Why wasn't the appendix to extend the Class Charlie further down the Thor arrival for Sanford jet traffic not considered? This is a major corridor for RAs, and this would have deconflicted non-participating VFR traffic and would have had an actual positive effect on safety. So why wasn't the appendix to extend the Class Charlie further down the Thor for Sanford jet traffic not considered is the question.
That's a great question. So that appendix was in our initial proposed design. We wanted that appendix. We do have a lot of issues out there with non-participating aircraft and the jet aircraft that come down on the Thor arrival, mostly going to Sanford. So the removal of that shelf to protect the Thor, that was a recommendation incorporated from the ad hoc committee and some other powers that be. It was deemed too non-standard. In absence of that, we have been working with Orlando Tracon. They're on the receiving end of that. We feed that into Orlando Tracon. So we start the initial portion of that arrival. Orlando is the one that sequences into Sanford and the other airports that it serves. We're looking at some potential non-rulemaking alternatives to help reduce the conflicts between aircraft on that arrival and the non-participating VFR aircraft.
And Mike, I do recall quite a bit of conversation about the appendix, as we're calling it today. I do recall the proposal, and there were some safety concerns in that area. And this, to me, is a great example of the process working itself out, where there's consideration from both the operation and the aviation stakeholders, and we're looking at other options as a result of that collaboration and deliberation. Thank you for that, Mike. I appreciate it. The next question, can we just make it a Bravo already? This is so complicated. So Class Bravo airspace, they're asking, can we just make it a Bravo airspace? Theo, do you mind taking that question?
Oh, not at all. So Daytona Beach does not meet the requirements for Class Bravo airspace. Expanding on that, Bravo is more restrictive than Class Charlie. The goal of this proposal is to improve safety while having the minimal impact on non-participating aircraft. Class Bravo would have a lot of impact on non-participating aircraft, much more than the proposed expansion would.
Well put, Theo. Okay, we'll move on to the next question. All right, this question has to do with raising the altitudes. And Mike, I'm going to ask that you help me out here, and it has to do with the proposed design and why we raise the altitudes. I do recall there was quite a bit of conversation about the actual ceilings. And this again is a great example of the process working itself out, the collaboration with the ad hoc committee. And so the question is, why did you raise the altitudes for the Class Charlie airspace? Why'd you raise the altitudes?
So we actually did lower them from the initial proposal. It was 6,000 to coincide with that Thor appendix that was mentioned earlier in one of the questions. Now it's 5. The short answer to that is we want to resolve conflicts between controlled aircraft that are in a critical phase of flight and non-participating aircraft that are flying just above the current Class Charlie, which can be 4,001 feet. So we depart our jet and turboprop aircraft up to 4,000. There's nothing we can do procedurally or airspace-wise to change that. On the flip side of that, when they're descending into Daytona, they're also descending to 4,000. That's the high sector delivering to the low sector for sequence into Daytona. So traffic transitioning just above Daytona airspace, it can be a conflict out there. And when a controller gets busy, that's not something that we want to have out there on the table. We actually have an example of this if we can bring up board 38. So this, in our example, we have a controlled aircraft. That's aircraft number 1 that you see in yellow there. They're being vectored by our high radar sector to join a downwind for runway 7 left. A controlled aircraft would normally be descended to 4,000 feet. But in this case, this aircraft had to be stopped at 5,000 feet for that non-participating aircraft. That's that aircraft going northbound in blue. That was transitioning at 4,500 indicated. So in this case, the controlled aircraft reported a traffic collision avoidance system. That's a TCAS, resolution advisory, an RA, and had to be climbed to avoid the conflict. Non-participating VFR aircraft operating just above the current Class C present conflicts for arrivals and departures to Daytona Beach.
Well put. Thank you, Mike. And again, I believe this is a great indication of the collaboration that we've had both internally and externally. This is a great example of the altitudes that are needed to help with the operation. Thanks again, Mike. The next question: why are you moving ahead with this proposal when your staff study does not support it? The staff study was reviewed both at the Eastern Service Center and also at the Rules and Regulations policy group in headquarters. And this is in line with the procedures for handling airspace. And I think it was mentioned earlier, the 7400.2. The staff study was carried out to identify and document the necessity for changes to the Daytona Beach Class Charlie airspace. So the staff study does indicate the case for the modification, the proposed modification to the Class Charlie. The study's finding revealed that the existing airspace configuration is no longer conducive to ensuring the safety. And I should say, actually, it's no longer, it needs to kind of innovate and be enhanced as far as the safety is concerned in order to keep up with the operations of tomorrow. So the staff study actually does have some specific concerns and some specific activities that were followed in order to try to mitigate those issues. But this is the next step in the process in enhancing the safety and innovating to keep up with the operation of tomorrow. Thank you for that question. All right. Who benefits from these proposed changes? Theo, can you tell me who benefits from these proposed changes?
Absolutely. Everybody benefits from the proposed changes. All the aircraft arriving and departing Daytona Beach are going to be safe, or more safe, much safer, excuse me, and more efficient with the additional airspace, as well as the overflights through the Class Charlie. There are benefits to non-participating VFR aircraft as well, such as being able to arrive and depart Spruce Creek 624 straight in and straight out, as well as allowing for transitions closer to the shoreline that are currently allowed for non-participating VFR aircraft. So the short answer is everybody's going to benefit.
I appreciate that, Theo. And the goal is that everyone does gain more or have gain from the enhanced safety that the proposed modification would provide. Mike, I have a question about Spruce Creek. If you don't mind helping me out here, how will this affect arrivals, departures, and operations in the pattern at Spruce Creek?
So Spruce Creek is not a controlled airport. The arrivals, departures, and pattern operations at Spruce Creek are the responsibility of the pilots in and out of that airport. The airspace that's near Spruce Creek is mostly unchanged. There is a small cutout on the south side of Area A that we showed during the presentation video that allows for straight in and straight out arrivals and departures to runway 6 and 24 at Spruce Creek. The arrivals and departures to the northwest of Spruce Creek may have to fly extended miles, and we heard from some of the residents there that was one of their concerns. So if they choose not to participate in air traffic services, they may have to extend their miles out to the west. On the contrary, though, arrivals and departures to the northeast of Spruce Creek will have fewer miles to fly if they utilize the VFR corridor that we showed in Area C. So air traffic services to and from Spruce Creek should not change as a result of the expansion.
And the proposed modification has more is more focused on communication with air traffic versus exclusion. Does that sound about right, Mike?
That's correct.
Thank you. Well, since you're warmed up, Mike, I have another question for you. It's a little lengthy, but I think we can both get through it. In most previous versions of the proposed airspace modification since 2018, there's been a significant cutout in the surface area boundary for Spruce Creek. This cutout has been the catalyst for current modification processes, which commenced with Spruce Creek needing a cutout to promote safer operations, maneuvering in and out of their pattern. There are 35,000 operations per year at Spruce Creek. What is the basis of the removal of the large cutouts, and what is the empirical support for the change?
So we did collect safety data and analyze that over a period of time. I believe it was 2023 that the proposed design was submitted to the service center, right around probably the time we did the staff study. We had received the report from the ad hoc committee. We tried to incorporate the design into our final design, some of their suggestions, including the VFR transition to the east side of Daytona, but the cutout to the south that was requested was just far too large. It cuts inside of 3 miles finals. I think it was about 2.5 to 2 3/4 of the final approach course for runway 34. And I heard somebody had mentioned that earlier on one of the presentations. It's not just for IFR traffic. The majority of our traffic is VFR, general aviation. We're coming down on a downwind to base in that area, and we're issuing a descent and a switch over to the tower. So they can be well below the 1,600 feet that's out there by EOR, the final approach fix that was mentioned out there. That presents a conflict. So you have VFR aircraft potentially at almost 1,200 feet in conflict with aircraft that are arriving Daytona inside of a 3-mile final that may be in the process of being switched from the radar to the tower, so it might not be on frequency with aircraft that aren't even talking to us. So the safety risk for that large of a cutout to the south was just unacceptable for us.
Thank you, Mike. The next question has to do with the safety aspect. And Theo, how will these changes improve safety?
Sure. The changes will enhance safety and flight efficiency by ensuring all the aircraft operating within the confines of the proposed Class Charlie airspace are in communication with air traffic controllers. And that's going to provide more precise monitoring for the arriving and departing aircraft. The additional level of safety is going to reduce the amount of conflicts between aircraft in the vicinity, which again, the overall theme is to mitigate the risk that we have.
Well put, Theo. And throughout the night, you'll hear the same, a couple of the same words: safety, safety, safety. We're in the business of having the most safe option available. And this is a proposed design, and this is an enhancement to the safety. We already have a safe operation at Daytona Beach. This is the facility's latest option or to have a more safe operation. Thanks again, Theo. The next question, it has to do with the altitudes that are proposed in this latest design. And Mike, if you don't mind, why can't Daytona Beach just leave aircraft at higher altitudes to avoid conflicts? Why can't you just leave aircraft at higher altitudes to avoid conflicts, Mike?
So we do try to leave aircraft as high as possible to avoid conflicts. Eventually, though, aircraft have to get lower to either join approaches or descend for the airport. The other thing is we can't leave them at the altitudes we want if they're higher because there might be other traffic out there. I mean, the fact is on the west side of our current Class Charlie near DeLand, there's a lot of aircraft out there at many altitudes. There's many factors that impact the altitudes that air traffic can assign while vectoring to Daytona. We always assign altitudes that we feel are the safest and most efficient for the aircraft, but it's not always possible to use the highest altitudes to avoid the conflicts because, like I said, there might be traffic out there already. The proposed airspace, we're trying to protect the altitudes where conflicts most commonly occur outside the current Class Charlie. And I believe we do have an example for this, a visual, if we can bring up board 45. All right, so this one is not a video like the other one. This is just a still image, just gives you an example of what's out there. The controlled aircraft in this scenario is aircraft 1. They were being vectored towards the final approach course for Daytona Beach. The controlled aircraft needed to extend outside the current Class Charlie for the sequence. We get very long sequences of Daytona with the amount of aircraft that come inbound at the same time in 1 hour. In this case, it was stopped at 3,000 for traffic, which would be on the higher end of the altitude spectrum out there. You can see we have multiple non-participating VFR aircraft in that scenario. Aircraft 2, 3, 4, and 5 all weren't talking to us, and they're at different altitude spectrums out there. So the radar target for the controlled aircraft was likely to merge with non-participating VFR aircraft. This comes into play because we can't use altitude separation for a Mode C unless we verified it. And if we get to it, you'll probably see another example. I know it was mentioned in the presentations of aircraft transiting the current Class C inner circle just near Folig if they're going to the northwest. Again, they pass under there at 1,200. If we're at 1,600, that's 400 feet, and we can't use altitude separation. We have to use target resolution per our regulations. So in this case, the controlled aircraft was only able to begin the descent after re-entering the Class Charlie, approximately 8 miles from Daytona. And as the aircraft continued on to the final for Daytona, they were required to make a steeper than normal descent rate to join the final. And the higher we keep them, the higher we have to keep them closer to the airport, it risks a go around. If they're on an unstable approach, it's going to risk a go around. They're going to have to be vectored out for a resequence. It was mentioned earlier in the comments on the presentations how long it can take to get back in Daytona. So the last thing we want to do is send aircraft around and then have them rejoin the sequence again.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you for walking us through that example. We'll move on to the next question. If Daytona Beach air traffic is consistently vectoring and assigning altitudes that prevent issues, why do we need new Class Charlie airspace? Theo, I'm going to ask you to help out with that question. Why do we need the new airspace if you're constantly vectoring and assigning altitudes that prevent issues?
Sure. Well, adding the Class Charlie airspace will improve safety and will improve the efficiency of air traffic controllers while managing traffic and reducing avoidable conflicts. Air traffic is able to mitigate the majority of conflicts with vectors and altitudes, but the new airspace is going to further enhance, or correction, it's going to further reduce these conflicts and enhance our ability to mitigate those problems.
I like it, Theo. If you don't mind staying with me for this next question, it's about violating the Class Charlie.
Yeah.
What's the penalty for violating Class Charlie airspace? Will the FAA allow for one-time deviations for violating the airspace?
So there will be no change to how airspace violations are handled. Air traffic control will issue a brasher warning if appears a violation has occurred, but how potential violations are handled is and will be addressed by the Flight Standards District Office or FSDO.
Thank you, Theo. And really, it's still about communication. Just there's nothing that says that an aircraft, a pilot shouldn't call. This has nothing to do with exclusion from the airspace. It's communication between air traffic and the pilots. Okay, so we're shooting for not violating the Class Charlie airspace. Thanks again. The next question has to do with aircraft being at lower altitudes. Mike, if you don't mind, why are carrier aircraft descended to such low altitude so far from Daytona Airport? I know this has to do more with the procedural requirements. And well, before I start going off too far on a tangent, Mike, why are aircraft descended to such low altitude so far from Daytona Airport?
So this kind of ties into what I was saying before. We try not to descend them. Again, our high sector delivers to our low sector at 4,000 feet. So that's the altitude that they're going to start with. They may need to be descended to 3,000 feet for other non-participating traffic that's going above the current Class Charlie, or we have IFR overflights on routes that may conflict with that. So initially they're coming in at 4,000. We're trying to keep them high, usually getting descended to 3,000 on the downwind to start the sequence into Daytona. So if we're talking about IFR aircraft and air carrier aircraft in particular, they're crossing FOLIG, which is the final approach fix for the approaches into 7 left, the RNAV and the ILS at 1,600 feet. Many of the air carriers are also going to follow that requirement for vertical and lateral guidance on the instrument procedure, even when they're conducting visual approaches. So we're trying to establish a normal descent rate out there. We like all aircraft to be below 3,000 by a 10-mile final per 7 left. And again, that goes back to what altitudes are available for us, whether we're able to descend or not. You know, sometimes we might have non-participating aircraft out there at 3,000, so we'll have to get below that. But bottom line, when they're coming into Daytona, we want them to be established and have a normal descent rate so we can try to avoid an unstable approach and a go-around. Beyond that, we, as air traffic controllers, assign aircraft altitudes that mitigate conflicts. So again, if I have another aircraft that's at 4,000 feet or 3,000 feet, my best move might be to send up 2,000 to get away from those aircraft.
Well put, Mike. The next question, what alternatives to changing the airspace have been executed? And is there a report that shows the effectiveness of these alternatives? Theo, what alternatives to changing the airspace have been executed? And is there a report that shows the effectiveness of these alternatives?
Sure. Well, alternative solutions have been attempted, but they've been met with limited success. For example, Daytona Beach has a letter of agreement, an LOA, with the local flight schools That includes avoid areas, which are areas Daytona has requested non-participating VFR aircraft to remain clear of to increase safety and reduce congestion and conflicts. Despite this, air traffic still observes numerous conflicts between participating and non-participating VFR aircraft in those areas. Another example is that we routinely and regularly host user meetings, invite all users where we're able to communicate concerns. The users are able to raise concerns with air traffic. So there's that communication with the local flight schools, local general aviation users, and the commercial users as well. In addition to that, we have attempted modifications to our internal standard operating procedures, our SOP, to mitigate these conflicts, but we've been met with limited success in that avenue. So we've tried several alternatives before headed down this road of the Class Charlie proposal.
Thank you, Theo. The next question is about Class Charlie cutout. I believe the reference is to the south that affects Spruce Creek. Mike, I see you just popped off of mute. Why did you remove the Class Charlie cutout from your previous proposal? The statement is this cutout gives Spruce Creek the ability to fly a standard left downwind for runway 06. Why did you remove the Class Charlie cutout from your previous proposal?
So I believe the cutout that they're referencing is almost the squared cutout that was to the northwest of Spruce Creek, in the southwest portion of the inner circle. If that's correct, I believe that was based on the ad hoc report, that proposed change wasn't adequate for safe operations at Spruce Creek. I think they said that they would be funneled into a pinch point down there at a sharp angle, just to the northwest of Spruce Creek or the northeast of Spruce Creek. So we took the opinion of the ad hoc into account with that, and we made the decision to remove that square cutout. I believe that's the one that they're talking about, and just go with the proposal to do the cutout to the south, which would allow the straight in and straight out from 624. And I heard it mentioned earlier in one of the presentations, something to consider. That cutout is still there for straight in, straight out 24. I know it was hard to see on the slides we presented, but it is still there. And then a secondary part, it's not a part of this project, but something that was discussed was a cutout of the New Smyrna class Delta to allow the Spruce Creek pilots more room to maneuver down there. As far as I know, that's still on the table. It's not a part of this project. It's outside of the scope of this project. But between those two and then the VFR beach transition, we are looking at that to accommodate Spruce Creek.
Thank you, Mike. Will the operational and procedural changes that were considered and dismissed before the airspace change changes, essentially the question is, will the procedural changes that were considered and dismissed prior to this proposal be made available for public review? The initial proposed design, as well as other considerations, are documented in the staff study. So all those things that were considered, all those options that were considered and vetted are documented in the staff study. But the staff study is not typically just released publicly, but it may be requested through the Freedom of Information Act or FOIA Act, and you can submit that to the FAA. All right, the next question, why are you not addressing the real increase and the very real risks associated with pinching? Mike, I'm going to ask that you help me out with this question. The question is, why are you not addressing increased risk and crowding of aircraft to the west of Daytona? Why are we not addressing the increase in risk according to this question, and the crowding of aircraft to the west of Daytona?
So the intent is not to force aircraft into that corridor. We want to be able to talk with those aircraft. We want predictability, and we want to be able to apply our separation standards, especially when they're operating in close proximity to our final approach course into Daytona. And as a secondary part of that, we did build the VFR transition to the east to alleviate that. So instead of flying to the northwest to the DeLand area, you take the course to the east to the beach to get out of the busy traffic over there.
And I do want to reiterate that this isn't, so someone mentioned earlier about Class Bravo airspace, which does create more control versus Class Charlie. Class Charlie airspace, the new lines are drawn, but it's a communication line. So these points that are being referenced, these conflict points that are being created, they're really just a matter of, please call air traffic when you hit these new lines or proposed lines. So this is, again, about communication and not exclusion into the airspace in order to help everyone in and around the operation. Thanks, Mike. The next question: can a remote communication be installed at Spruce Creek? This would enhance safety, allowing us to be assigned a code, even for VFR flight before departure. So Theo, if you don't mind helping me out with this question, I'm not sure if you can, but can a remote communication be installed at Spruce Creek?
I don't believe it can, but the Spruce Creek pilots are welcome to call the Daytona Beach TRACON via phone to request a beacon code and flight following before they depart. We actually encourage this. We believe it increases safety and the predictability of aircraft transitioning through Daytona airspace. And Mike, you can help me out. I believe it's 386-226-3939, unless that's changed, and that will that'll get a dial line straight into the TRACON from outside. Is that correct still?
I think that number's still good, yeah.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. If you don't mind staying with me, Theo, this may be a little bit of an easier question. How many daily airline flights operate into Daytona?
So there's 17, and that's based on our OpsNet traffic data. 17 per day, and that was in the year 2024. That's the most complete data I have right now.
The next question touches on our collaboration with the ad hoc committee. For those that don't know, we've spoken a lot about the ad hoc committee, but the ad hoc committee is a group that's established by aviation stakeholders. Well, it's a cross section of aviation stakeholders that are commissioned with taking a look at the proposed design and providing their input on that proposed design based on their needs. And that's a cross section of aviation stakeholders. And they convened a little bit over a year ago and provided a report. And based on that report, the controllers here at Daytona Beach made some modifications to their proposed design based on that input. So we talk a lot about the ad hoc committee. That's who they are. They are a cross-section of aviation stakeholders who provided their input on the proposed design. So, Mike, were any of the ad hoc committee recommendations incorporated? If so, what specifically?
Yes, we did incorporate some of the ad hoc considerations and recommendations. The offshore transition to the east, the VFR beach transition, that was a direct result of the response from the ad hoc and us talking to the ad hoc. We had been meeting with them during the design process. Outside of their official group, we met with some of the people from Spruce Creek, and that was one of the direct results with that. One of their concerns also coming straight into runway 24 or departing runway 6 from Spruce Creek, you're right into the inner circle, the current inner circle of Daytona Class Charlie. So that cutout that allows them to do that was also a direct result of the ad hoc report and talking to the Spruce Creek pilots. And then the last one off the top of my head, the Thor appendix, the infamous Thor appendix, that was removed because of the concerns raised in the ad hoc reports.
And Mike, I recall the altitudes basically everywhere were affected as a result of the ad hoc committee report.
Yeah, that lowered our original ceiling that we had at 6,000, and we brought it down to 5 since that was out. And we also tightened up a lot of the airspace. The initial design had some shelves for 1634 operations at Daytona. We got rid of that completely. We got rid of a cutout to the northeast of Daytona completely. We tightened up the areas that were meant to deconflict with our downwind traffic. We moved those further south to try to accommodate some of the non-participating aircraft and their routes and some of the glider and aerobatic operations that were brought to our attention. And then the inner circle, I'm trying to remember if the video that we showed earlier actually reflects it, but we did move the inner circle to the east more, so it doesn't extend further out west. To try to line up with some visual nav aids. There's a group of power lines out there that run north-south that we tried to keep it inside of that so that the pilots would have something to navigate on. So there were multiple things that we did as a result of the ad hoc report.
And just to expand a little bit on that, what is created and proposed is the optimal proposed design that's submitted to the ad hoc committee. And air traffic attempts to negotiate as much as possible along with what the aviation stakeholders need without compromising safety. And that's what the folks at Daytona have done. There is a significant change in how the proposed design looks compared to how it was initially. I think it's a really good example of compromising and collaborating with internal and external stakeholders. Thanks again, Mike. The next question, Theo, you've had a little bit of a break. So let's go with you if you don't mind. Flying frequently near Class Charlie and when contacting Daytona Beach approach, most times I hear maintain VFR, stay clear of Class Charlie. How will controlling many more airplanes improve the service?
Good question. FAA Order 7110.65, which discusses air traffic and the procedures, requires air traffic to advise aircraft to remain clear of Class Charlie airspace on initial contact when the intent is for pilots to do so. Otherwise, two-way radio communication has been established and the aircraft may enter the airspace. This is not done to keep aircraft out of Class Charlie indefinitely, rather to allow air traffic time to identify the aircraft prior to entering Class Charlie and provide any sort of deconfliction that we need to do. We believe that aircraft participating in air traffic services will increase the predictability, and it allows us, air traffic, to mitigate potential conflicts and do a better job and increase the safety.
And the next question actually is a pretty good add-on, continuation of your point. What specific measures will the FAA implement to ensure that the increased interaction with air traffic translates into improved safety and efficiency for all aircraft in the area, including small general aviation flights that may not be accustomed to the new requirements?
Well, the requirements for flying in Class Charlie airspace have not changed, and they will not change as a result of this proposal. Air traffic will open additional sectors to handle the increased interaction with pilots as needed. We believe that this will ensure and improve the safety and efficiency of the Daytona Beach airspace.
Thank you, Theo. The next question is getting into the air traffic controller handbook. This is an interesting question. So, Mike, what is the paragraph being cited as a reference in the air traffic controller handbook that supports the assertion that controllers can't use altitude separation from non-participating aircraft? Now, this actually has come up quite a bit in the staff study and the conversations that we've had. So you may actually have something there. What is the paragraph cited as a reference that you can't use altitude separation from non-participating traffic?
So that's a great question. I'm glad we can finally clarify this one because it did come up a lot. So that's job order 7110.65, our order that guides everything that we do. That's going to be under 5.2.15 subsection C. It's validation of mode C altitude readout. And that section says, when unable to validate the readout, do not use mode C altitude information for separation. So how does this come into play for us? Typically, altitude separation is our easiest form. When we can't use that, we have to use target resolution. That means we can't let the center of we have little dots on our radar scope that represent the aircraft. We can't let the center of those touch if we're not using the altitude separation. Or we have to use pilot applied visual separation. Now, both of those procedures can be very time consuming and extensive for air traffic controllers, especially when we're very busy. One of the good examples for this one, when we have to apply it, it was brought up earlier. If we have aircraft, non-participating aircraft that are just outside of our inner circle, below the outer circle, a good example here would be on the 7 left final near Fulling when they're transitioning just below 1,200 feet out there. I can't use that 1,200 feet that's on the readout because I'm not talking to that aircraft. So if you're a non-participating aircraft, I haven't been able to talk to you to verify that that's your correct altitude. So therefore, I can't use that for separation. Now, in that case, now I have to use target resolution, which means that I hope that those targets aren't going to touch as my traffic on the final is passing near the aircraft that's transitioning without talking to us. Or I have to use pilot applied visual, which means I'm communicating with the pilot that I am talking to, calling that traffic, and then hoping that that pilot gets the traffic in sight so I can have them maintain visual on their own. In this particular area, it was one of the reasons we wanted the expansion to the west of the inner circle. They're on a critical phase of flight. We're very busy. We've sequenced a lot of aircraft. The air controller working that final sector is extremely busy, and it's a critical phase of flight for the aircraft and for us because we have to transfer communications to the tower right in that area. So we may not be able to call that traffic, use pilot applied visual or the lateral separation that we need.
Well put, Mike. And I promise I won't ask you to quote any more of the 7110. I can't make that promise. I'm sorry. We'll avoid it. How's that? Thanks. The next question, Theo. No, I won't ask you to quote any of the 7110. But this question has to do with letters to airmen. Why is there not a letter to airmen published that would be similar to the letters of agreement with the flight schools, but which would be available to all pilots?
That's an easy one. Daytona is currently working on a letter of airmen to provide this information to all pilots.
I like it. We actually have the last question of the evening. And I'll ask both of you guys to help out with this question, and I'll tee it up first with Theo. After implementation, how will the FAA integrate existing operations into the new airspace, and how will the FAA measure this project's success?
All right, I'll take the first part of that. The core purpose of this project is to enhance aviation safety by reducing risk. The design was developed through extensive analysis of existing flight paths, while also considering the impact to all the users through the ad hoc committee. This initiative is not solely intended to benefit commercial airlines. Rather, it adds that extra layer of safety for all users of the airspace whether they are participating or not.
And Mike, did you want to add anything to that? How will the FAA integrate existing operations to the new airspace, and how will the FAA measure this project's success?
So we don't plan on changing existing operations. We're just trying to mitigate some of the risks that we have out there. From a controller perspective, the measure of success, I mean, our number one job is to prevent a collision in the system, and that's what we're trying to do. With the volume that we're seeing, the complexity we're seeing, and the inadequacy of the current Class C, which is very outdated, that's our measure for success. We want less conflicts in the airspace.
Thank you, gentlemen. And if I could echo what you guys just mentioned, our measure of success is we're enhancing safety. We expect the safety of the operation to increase and the efficiency also to increase. So that's our measure of success as a safety organization. And the metrics may be there as well, but that's where we can see some immediate gains. Thank you both for the answers to the questions this evening and for representing your facility. You've done it in expert fashion. And thank you all for attending the Daytona Beach International Airport Proposed Class Charlie Airspace Modification Informal Airspace Meeting. The recording of this event will be available on the FAA's YouTube channel and at www.faa.gov/go/Daytona Beach. If your question was not answered today, please feel free to submit your question or comment during the open comment period to the email listed on the slide being shown. Remember, you must submit all comments no later than October 9th, 2025. All formal comments received during the comment period will be considered prior to any revision or issuance of a notice of proposed rulemaking for this airspace. The FAA appreciates your time and contributions to the proposed design of the Daytona Beach Class Charlie airspace. This concludes our meeting. Have a wonderful evening.